Hi. This is a demo of an Ethiopian or Coptic bookbinding technique. So it's a simple bind, but there are a lot of variations that can increase the complexity. So this is an example of a book that's done with multiple needles, 4 needles. I'm going to show today a 2-needle stitch, which is the simplest form of this. And I'm going to be making a simple booklet with 3 signatures. So a signature is basically a set of pages, each of which is made up of 3 greeting cards. And a greeting card is like this. You could take a piece of paper and a bone folder, or the edge of a pencil, and fold that in half. And then you have a greeting card. So 3 of those greeting cards, typically together, depending on the thickness of the paper, is going to make 1 signature. So here I've got 3 signatures, and each one is made up of 1, 2, 3 greeting cards, like that. So those go together, stacked like that, and it makes 1 signature. I'll do 3 signatures for the sake of time today, but more complicated books can of course be made with many signatures. So this is more like 20 signatures altogether with a wooden cover. So we'll start now with something straightforward, which is, again, just 3 signatures. So I'm going to stitch this book together, different from a Smyth Sewn book in which you need thread and strips of paper or cotton. For this bind, you need just 1 length of string. How much? Well, for a typical book, about a wingspan. So again, 2 arms length of thread. You want a bookbinding needle on each end of the thread. The first thing you're going to do with your signatures before you start sewing is to use a ruler to measure the same distance from the 2 ends of the book. So in this case, I'm doing 2 inches in on that side, and then 2 inches in on this side. I've got my 2 marks. I'm going to replicate those on each of my signatures. Then I want to get a box, a cardboard box that has some thickness, works best. And I'll take the signature one at a time and go to my marks, and then either take a needle or an awl. This is called an awl, so it's basically a nail on a stick. And then I'm going to come straight in at my mark, and I'm just going to push all the way through, and I'm coming down at a 45-degree angle into the book. What this does is it makes the little volcano of exploded paper that happens on the other side of that piercing go to the inside, which is really important, so that you don't wind up seeing on the outside of your book all these little volcanoes where the awl or the needle exited. So once you get your signatures folded, and then you get all of your holes poked, in this case I'm doing a 2-needle stitch, so I've got 2 sets of holes. So each signature has 2 holes in it going all the way down. I'm going to take my first signature. Let me turn my workspace a little bit. I'll take my first signature and then take my 2 bookbinding needles. And I'm going to start on the inside, and I'm going to come from the inside out through the holes that I've already made with my awl. If they get out of line, like right now, I just want to get them right back into line so I'm not replicating and making 2 holes. I'm just going to come in like that, and then on the other side, I'm going to do the same thing. So that I have, after I untangle this, basically 1 signature with 2 ends of the thread coming out. And I want to equalize those as best I can and pull it snug. You never in this process want to really tug on the thread, because you'll wind up with a book that sits on the table and opens itself if it's bound too tight. So once I have these two threaded through like that, to this first signature, I'm going to really simply just go into the next signature through the corresponding two holes that I've poked. So in the next signature, I'm just coming in, like that. Same thing here. I'm going to stack these two and then just pull that a little bit taut. I'll come closer so you can see. So I've got these two that are stitched together, and I'm just pulling that slightly taut. And I don't want it really, really tight, just a little bit. So once I've got those two stitched together like that, I'm going to open the signature, the second one that I just came in through. See down when the needle's coming out. I'm going to open that and do my best to hold the tension. So if I lose some, it's not the end of the world. I'm going to come back through. And I'm being careful not to poke the needle through the thread, which will lock me up so I can't tighten later, which is really important to be able to do. The best kind of thread to use for this is a waxed linen thread. So it's a thicker linen thread that is either pre-coated with beeswax, or that you take and then you sort of like shimmy the string back and forth on a block of beeswax. The reason for the beeswax is that it helps to hold your knots in place. So now I've come back out through my second signature. I'm going to pull these slightly taut. And if I am not using wax thread, it's going to be really, really difficult to keep them tight. So once I've come out, I'm going to do what's called a kettle stitch, which is to come back in between the two signatures. I'm going to count back into the valley, and then I'm going to come with my needle back through, and what this does is it cements that knot so it's not going to pull loose as easily. Also, when you repeat it over 10 or 20 signatures, it creates a really beautiful pattern. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing on the other side. This is all symmetrical. So what I do to one side, I'll do to the other. I'm coming back. My teacher, Susie Cozens, used to say, into the valley between the two signatures, and then under the bridge. The needle's coming under the bridge, which is underneath the stitch between these two signatures. And I'm going to pull that taut, and again, I'm just giving it a little tug. I want to make sure when I'm pulling taut to hold these together, not let them open, and then just to give it a little bit of tension. If I give it too much, what's going to happen is that, again, the book's going to like open on its own. So I've got my two signatures stitched together, and at this point I'm just repeating the same pattern. So I've come out these two signatures, I've done my kettle stitch, and I'm just going to go in with both needles through the same corresponding holes on my next signature. So this is my next signature here, and roughly line that up. And I'm coming back in through those same two holes. And it's really important that you took the time in the beginning to measure accurately so that these holes all end up in the same place. Otherwise it winds up looking like a zigzag, really, really gross. So once I'm inside of these two signatures, I'm just doing the same pattern again. I'm going to pull as taut as I can, and then I'm just going to cross over and through the middle here, exit out through the opposite hole. So again, I'm being careful not to double sew that stitch. So I'm getting this thread out of the way, and then I'm exiting to the other side. So I've got that pulled taut like that. And then here I'm exiting through, again, that same hole. And I've lost some of my tension here. You can see the thread's a little bit loose. So I'm just going to give that a little bit of a tug with the book closed to pull it taut. So at this point, I have 2 valleys between signatures. So I'm going to count back 2 valleys. So 1, 2, and I'm going in that valley under the bridge, which is under the last stitch between signatures. I miss it. Some acrobatics. I've seen people use curved needles, which seems to work pretty well, if you can get your hands on one. So I'm coming through, this is my kettle stitch again, and I'm going to pull it taut. From here on out, every time I exit a signature and I do my kettle stitch, I'm going to count back 2 valleys. So 1 valley, 2 valleys, the valleys between signatures, and then do that kettle stitch. So this is the same pattern that I repeat again and again, even if I was doing many, many signatures. Here I'm doing my kettle stitch, making sure it's tight. At this point, I'm finished, though I could keep going with the same pattern. I could take these needles and go into the next signature and just repeat it. But when I get to my last signature, I want to pull snug and then pull this down and sort of across the 2, or the multiple kettle stitches that I've done, like that. When I finish here, I want to come back into my last signature and tie off. So I'm going to, here you can see the signatures, I'm going to open that last signature, the last one that I added. I'm going to re-enter that signature. I'll turn this around so you can see. And I've got these 2 threads that are here. I'm going to make sure that they're pulled snug. At this point, I can take the bookbinding needles off and not lose them. And then I'm just going to tie off with a double knot. So that's left over right and right over left, or like a box knot. So you start like you're tying your shoes, turn this to the side, and I can put a finger there to kind of hold it in place, and then right over left, and I can tie my knot like that. It's nice to leave these 2 threads so that if anything happens with the book, you can untie and restitch it. Often people will cut with scissors the thread like right at this point, so that it's just long enough. But you can also leave it and turn it into, it's long enough a wrap for the book to keep it closed. But at this point, you've got that basic Ethiopian or Coptic bookbind. And you can attach the front hardcovers. I'll show that in a different video. Anyway, so that's how to make this bookbind.